where now with React is just a front end framework. Doesn't do any back end work. It's just strictly the presentation layer, just displayed on the screen essentially. There's other front end frameworks like Angular, Vue. What else is there? Is one of them? I don't know. Or is that for Java? I don't know. There's a bunch of front end frameworks. And the reason why React is so popular is because it is created by Facebook. And Facebook is just continuing to support it and continuing to evolve it into just continuing to support it. That's why a lot of frameworks fall off, is because just the general support for it falls off, or a better framework, easier framework to work with that solves the problems that other developers are running into easily or more efficiently. So that is why React is becoming so popular and is so popular, essentially because of Facebook. So in order to install a React app, so previously in Django, we have to do like Django admin start project, right? It's like some command. Where Django has projects, like it has a project, and a Django project has many apps. React isn't like that. React is just a React app. That's all it is. It's just one app. It's a React app. And so there is no projects and apps within projects. Do you remember a little thing called npm? Install? No. When we used to do a pip install Django, well, Node has npm, which is Node Package Manager. And if you want to install different React packages, you can install some package. Inside of npm, there's a little thing called npx, which is a newer, cooler way. It's just a different way to install packages. And there is, let's Google it. How to create a new React app. How to create a new React app. Create a new React app. Sweet. Documentation is excellent because it's supported by Facebook, and they just are constantly upgrading documentation. So it says npx create React app. So npx is kind of like npm. Create React app. We'll actually create it, and then you can call your app something like this. Right here, it's called my app. Let's go ahead and do that. npx create React app. I apologize at a time because this is going to take quite a long time. So in the meantime, as this is installing, I want you to install, go to the Chrome extensions, go to the Chrome Web Store, and install React Developer Tools. React Developer Tools should be the first one. So React Developer Tools offered by Facebook adds React debugging tools to the console, Chrome Developer Console. We're bad at. So yeah, just if you just Google Chrome extensions, the first thing, and then React Developer Tools, and add to Chrome. Once that's done, and it's actually tools, extensions, and it's actually and it's actually turned on or activated, you should see this little like atom looking thing in your Chrome browser. Does everyone see that? Yeah. So it'll tell you whether or not the page you're currently on is using React. Still installing. So in the future lectures, we're going to already have React app installed, and we're going to build off of it because this takes a little while.
I like that the React documentation is not using React.
Neither is Facebook.com.
I think it is. We probably just won't be able to investigate or debug it or look into it.
Oh, you.
So it's still installing. There we go. We're done.
I think once you log in.
All right, let's bring it back. So, success. Created my app at, it gives you the path name, my app. And inside that directory, you can run several commands. Npm start. That's where go back to the npm instead of using npx. Npm run build, bundle the app into static files for production. We'll rarely ever do that unless we're going to be to Heroku. Npm test if you want to run tests. These are all scripts built into React. So clear, ls, with our clicker that we did vanilla JavaScript and HTML, and here's my app. I'm going to cd into my app. I'm going to open all that in current. So this is what React app folder architecture looks like. We have these things called node modules, the directory, giant directory. We'll get into that. We have a publics file. This is kind of like all your static files in Django, where you create static and like your CSS. This is where all your static files go. Rarely ever touch this. Your favicon, your index HTML, manifest, and some logos. We have our source. This is where the majority of our code is going to go. We have like our CSS in here. We have app.js. We're going to get into that. We have our get-ignore file that already has a bunch of stuff in it, which is nice. We have the node module. You never want to push up node modules to GitHub. Never, because it's a massive file. You have your package.json. Got package.json lock. You got your question.
So note on that, back to that extension real quick, you have to enable, allow access to file URLs in order for it to work properly and see if the page is using React or not. I had to go and enable that, and now I can see that the documentation page is using.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. Cool. So in Python, we had to create a virtual environment where we installed all the packages and modules that we wanted to use in that Django project and keep it insulated from the entire rest of the computer. The package.json file is that kind of like that equal. This is just tells you all the packages needed to run your application. So in here we have, they're called dependencies. There's dependencies as well as dev dependencies. In here there's currently no developer dependencies. So we have this testing library, just DOM, test React. We have React installed, the library framework. We have React DOM. We have React scripts. Those are all external libraries that are already pre-installed in React. Then we have scripts. These are the actual scripts we run, where it's like npm build or npm test, and it runs these specific scripts. So if I run npm start, React runs this React scripts, starts. Build, test, inject. We really don't need to worry about any of that right now. So that's the package JSON file. If I want to install packages for my React library, they'll show up under dependencies. So if I install something, it'll have the package down here, or like another one will show up. Package.json lock file essentially gives a snapshot of all the libraries you already have installed for this application and the versions of it. So if anything changes, you can always revert back to the JSON lock file and just go use that specific version. Get-ignore, we're pretty familiar with get-ignore. When you push it up to GitHub, it ignores all this stuff. Doesn't push this stuff up with it. Node modules is just a directory of all the packages in the node module that just all the packages available to React and just Node. So it's a massive, massive file. You're never going to go in here, so don't worry about it. Public, we have our favicon, index HTML, we're going to get into that, some logos. And in our source, as I said, we're going to get into that. So how do I start? So in Python or in Django, we do like Python manage.py. That equivalent is just the npm. That kind of just executes the whatever script you're going to run. So like before it's like Python. If I wanted to start the Python project server, it'd be Python manage.py run server. Where in React, it's just npm. And in our package.json file, we've got these scripts. We just want to do npm start. It's going to run a React.
Is that same as NPX and NPM are the same?
They're not the same, but NPX is kind of like a new way of going. So here's our React app. That's already kind of like how we have the Django static screen where it shows like a little rocket ship and stuff. This is a React app. I've already started the server around a localhost 3000 and automatically opens up for you. Edit, source app.js, and save to reload. So here's the logos. So let's look at here. So what this does, look at our index HTML. So this is like the entry point into our, that shows up on the screen. And here, this is kind of familiar doc type. We have head, all your metadata, link, cool. And now we have in our body tab, we just have one div called ID root. In all our React app, this is the entry point that React injects all the presentation layer, all the HTML or JSX. This is where it injects all our React app right here. So you never really touch this. It's already so unless you want to use, Google Fonts, stuff like that, that's where you kind of put that stuff in here. Or like Bootstrap, CDS. That still all operates the same if you want it from here, but you never really, not touching anything within the body tag, or not really touching any HTML. Any questions up until this point? All right, so let's get into our source. In our source, we have an index.js file. So let's look at this. Like Python, it was always from so-and-so file, import, views, from something, import some class name. JavaScript or React, a little different. It's import something from a file name or import something from a package. So we're importing React from React. We're also importing React DOM from React DOM. And where is this stuff coming from? Again, in our package.json file, these are already packages pre-installed into React. React and React DOM. So these two, like that. React DOM. We're importing some CSS from index CSS. We're importing app from app.js. We'll get to that momentarily. And we're importing everything as service worker from service worker. This is just to get the server running. You don't really touch this. This just gets the server running. So we're calling a method React DOM.render. Render takes in two arguments. Takes in an element, a component, or a React component, or a React element, and kind of like the document that get element by ID. So get element by ID right here. So it's get element by ID root, and inject this app that comes from this app file. So let's look at this app.js file. This is React. This is where all your stuff's going to go. Importing React again. Got React. Import logo from logo. So that's this SVG file. Import some CSS. And kind of looks just like a function, right? Function, uppercase app. That's the name of what we're going to call components. And it returns something that looks like HTML, but is actually called JSX. So all this is what this is. So we have a header, a class name. So HTML is called class, in JSX it's called class name. App header, we have an image with a source, which is this logo, class name app logo, alt tag, to this edit part. And we have a link to React documentation. And at the bottom it says, it says Learn React, which is a link. And then in order to use this app.js file outside in other parts of the application, you always have to export default app. Cool. That's kind of the architecture.
Wait, was the export default app, was the function named app?
Yep, so a function name is app, and you generally want to name the files the same as the name of your function or component. So this is what's called a component. We're going to get into that.
They're still descriptive called class.
But I think that class, well, you can't because class is like a class component. So like JavaScript, object program, class is already a keyword. So we kind of just quickly went through React, like the folder directory architecture. Now let's kind of like go into some key words and things you should be familiar with. So React, things called components. So a component lets you split the UI into independent, reusable pieces. Think of that, reusable pieces, and think about each piece in isolation. There's things called class-based components. There's things called functional-based components, and can have data. So each component have some sort of data, which is called data as state and or props. State and props, they're like almost like variables, but like that's what they're called. You can't mutate that. It's called state. It's always going to be called state. So when you're accessing state, you can't call state something else, or you can't call props a different keyword. It's just called state and props. So props, components can accept data as props. State is an object, so just think of like a JavaScript object, like with this JavaScript object that stores data that is local to that individual component. Similar to props, but it is only local to that very specific component. We're going to get into props and how props interacts with different components. And from here on out, I'm going to refer to things as components versus functions. JSX looks like, acts like HTML, but it's actually a syntax extension to JavaScript, so it's actually JavaScript. Allows us to write JavaScript in line with HTML. Think of Jinja 2 and Python, how we're injecting Python variables into HTML. But now we're allowed to essentially write what looks like HTML, but it's actually JavaScript, and we're able to, it's called JSX, but we're able to inject JavaScript into that. So here's a Airbnb. Airbnb uses React for their application. So think of everything on the screen as a component. So up here we have an example like where it says dates. That's, let's just call it component 1. This little section right here is called component 2, and this big section called component 3. So remember I said components are like reusable pieces. So what on this page also looks like that component?
Good guess.
status, price, we have time, language. Likewise with component 2, hiking, agriculture, camping. Same with component 3, it's got all these things. Those are all one component. Like this is just component 1, it's just rendered, it's displayed, 5 times. The only things that are different about this component are what?
And the names and where they go.
So the data that is passed into that component changes to make it display something else or operate in a different way. Likewise with agriculture, component 2, we've got hiking, must pass in different experiences, some 7, 4, so that's another different type of data that is passed into that component for it to display this. Same with this. So let's break down component 3 even further. So component 3 can have components nested inside of it. So component 3 can have like a favorite icon. Oh, component 3 has 2 components. What 2 components does it have? Like right here. So it's got this card image, and it's got this card main. So component 3 has 2 components in it. And now within card main, it has 1 component called star rating, and the card image component has another component called favorite icon. And you kind of see the way I'm writing these components. It's like the dash, like the, what is it called? Force. What are they called? Force? Or what?
Oh,
Yeah, it looks like this.
What is space for the assumption?
That's just best practices. Yeah, so you're always going to have a space in between the name of the component and backslash. So component 3 is the parent component of card image and main component, right? And then favorite, that card image component is the parent of favorite icon. Star rating component is the name, is the parent, or I'm sorry, is the sibling of card main, or card main is the parent of star rating. And now remember the term props. Props can have data as state and or props. Props, the actual name props, it's just data. It's always passed down from the parent component down to the sibling or the child component. Always works like that, just one level down. Passes props down one level to the parent, or to the sibling. So this is just a quick rendering of the code of how, so we have component 3 that returns a div with a card image component and a card main component, and then in a separate file, we have a card image component that has a favorite icon component and some more elements like that you want to display or whatever. And then the card main can return the star rating component. And just like some more elements like title, description, whatever else you want to display in that component. So here is actual Airbnb. It is using React. This page is using the production build of React. So I'm going to investigate it. And if I look down here, I can see we got components and profiler. I can click components. And here are all the components. Ooh, that's fancy. Let's go back. So let's look at this component. So this is how you can see, like when I highlight this component, it says props right here. And this is all the data that's passed into that component as props. And then look at, we also have a thing called state. Right now we have a state, which is an object. Close it. So state is an object that stores data that is located in the component. So props is just data that's passed into this component. State is an object with a key called event data context, and it's currently set to null. So that's how you can inspect.
So it's not passing in any data in that one?
No, it's passing it in as props. So
Oh,
there's data passed in, like styles and a bunch of stuff. All right. Let's move back to. Let's see if my page top. So I use React on mine. Mine's going to be probably a little easier to interpret. Or not.
It's pretty straightforward.
Oh, wow. I think that's because it's a production build and it doesn't have any props or state or anything. It's just like a website. Let's go back to the code. So this app, this is a component. And remember how I passed it into app, or this React render DOM? So that's where that syntax comes from, where it's like, I always forget what those are called. So that's what it's, any brackets, yeah. So that's what a component looks like when you're passing it into a different part of the page, a different part of the application. Any questions up until this point? Nope. In here, remember how I said
So state backend and props is displaying it. So what's the difference between props and states?
So props is data that's passed down from the parent component. State is objects that are declared in the current component. So props is always passed down, and state is always declared in the current component.
So state is its own parent, so to speak.
Like an inheritance kind of thing? No.
I mean,
Is state like class and props are like a census?
no, don't think of it as object-oriented programming with regards to state props. Just think of it as props is an object, and props is literally just data that's passed down from a parent component to its sibling component. And we're not talking about inheriting stuff or anything like that.
Okay. That's
So we have these things called class-based components and functional-based components. As of React 16.4, it's moving towards, React is moving towards functional-based components, which is easier. Well, yeah, it's kind of easier. So in this application, what does this look like? Okay, sorry. What is this? Function based. Yeah. Yep. So this is considered a functional based component. And we'll get into what a class based component looks like. So let's recreate the cookie kernel. We're gonna do it using a class based component, or I'm sorry, a functional based component, like it already is by default, because that's the way React is kind of going towards. But we're gonna also do it in that class based component way as well, because if you get out into the real world and you're working with React, you're going to see class-based components because they're not being deprecated or anything. They're just kind of changing, and everyone's going to still have class-based components.
And you can do the exact same thing. It's just
Yeah. So you could do essentially functional-based components and class-based components. There used to be only thing you could do in class-based components that you couldn't do in functional-based components, but now where React's going, you're able to do all the functionality in functional-based components.
gotcha.
Yep.
They have like an arrow function.
Like this.
Like it's kind of strange that they are using, like by default, they're using regular functions.
You can use that arrow functions, I think, as well. But I'm just going to keep it for this purpose. I'm going to keep everything kind of like the same. For this, for like components. So this is a component. Right? I'm going to say H1, click. And span 0. Let's go back to click 0. Cool. We all learned this. Inspect it. Let's go down to components. There's my app component. doesn't have any props, and it doesn't have state either. Now, I can create a button. Click me. There's my click me, and when I click it, I want it to do something. Now, state. State, like as I said, is an object that is declared in the individual component, like right here. It's not being passed in from another parent component, because this is entry point of the app. This is like the main app. This is the app right here. It's only got one component right now, so there is no, we're not passing in props. So in order to create state, you need to import something called use state, which is a function that returns two values. The function that returns two values. So let's look at this. I'm going to create, just for all intents and purposes, just to show you that this use state returns two things. I'm going to say flat bananas equals use state. Then I want to pass in the value of state. So I'm going to call it bananas. Let's call this. So I'm going to console log root at index 0. Index. Let's do console log type of root. Down here, I'm not getting an error, so it says logo is defined, but it's never used. So here, logo is defined, but it's never used. Let's delete it. Cool. Click, let's refresh it. I'm going to go into my console. So here it is. App.js on line 6. Type of fruit. It's an object, really an array. Fruit at index 0 is bananas, just what we declared right here. So bananas, the index 0. Now we got this dispatch action method or function at index 1. And this function enables you to change this value. So you need to invoke this function, which we're going to actually declare and call something else, in order to change state.
Does use state declare that it's an array? So that you don't have to say it's an array?
Yeah, so I'll show you the syntax. I just want to show you that this value of fruit, the type of, is like an object or an array, and it returns two values. One is the actual value that you input here, which is, this is the state, as well as like a function that will change state. So I'm going to just comment that out. And in order to create state, so what am I keeping track of in this clicker? What do we call that variable before? What was it? Count? So I'm going to do count to the first index, and then set count, which I'm going to, that's what I'm calling that function that is in the first index. So I'm actually calling it that, called set count. And it's always called set, whatever the name of that variable is. This is the state. So I'm going to say use state. And the initial value of count is what? 0. So it says set count is assigned a value, but it's never used. So here's a function or a component app, and it always is going to return this JSX. And it always has to be surrounded by an encapsulating div. You can't have like another div down here. You can't and like do something else. here. If I do that, it says an error comes up. It says parsing error adjacent JSX element must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Did you want JSX?
But you can have nested divs.
Correct. Yeah, you can have nested divs. So always going to return a div. Always. That's always what it's going to return. So I've got use state. That initial value of count is 0. So I'm going to console log count. So it says, so there's my count, 0. And this is like, it's called state. What's this current state of? Well, it's got a state count and it's got another state of something else if we wanted to add other data. So if I wanted to add this count into place of this 0, how can I do that?
This count bracket.
You can just do count.
Oh.
So I heard someone say this count. So this is an object-oriented program. This isn't a class-based component where we would use this. It's just a functional-based component where we can just call variables throughout. So think of just like a normal function, got a variable called count, and now we're passing in count in the span.
Tom, can you explain the line 6, I think? Again?
Line 6.
Oh, line 10, I'm sorry.
Line 10. So we're creating the initial state of this component that we're passing in this use state method that is built into React, which creates initial states of the component, so whatever data we want. And use state returns two values. The state that we want to declare, or the current value of state we want to declare, as well as a function that can manipulate or mutate the state. Because you never want to mutate state or props directly. You can't just be like, count equals 0. Never want to do that. Or count equals 5. You want use state to be able to change that value.
So then in this situation, set count is a method that is returned from use state?
Yep.
And
Correct.
is there a reason why you have it in brackets, like an array?
I think it's just almost kind of like destructuring. I don't know specifically why. I think that's just the syntax. I've never seen it before outside of React.
So, but count and set count, that's not, like, you wouldn't access it like a regular array then? It's kind of this.
Yeah, no. You can literally just call count and set count.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So refresh 0. Count is currently 0. I pass in 0, which signs count equals 0. Console logging it. Console log set count, which is literally just a function that can change count. So, for example, if I wanted to change count to, like, say 5, I can't just do count equals 5. I actually think you can, but you're not supposed to at all. It's going to mess up your app completely. Like,
When you set count.
you're going to want to console log, or yeah, let's do set count 5. Oh, see? So set count is continually executing. So we'll want to console log it. Oh, did it again.
I think you have to put it like in a callback or like a function.
Okay.
Why
Okay. Because it's just the way the set count works. You need to encapsulate it into a function. But we'll get to that. I just wanted to see if it worked. So set count.
And that's also one of the reasons why we have to use set count instead of count. Because React, I think it re-renders the page all the time. And if you change count,
It's easier
So what happens, so with React components, anytime state or props change, oh, depends on how you want it. Anytime state changes, the component will re-render. So your page will like refresh, or like a little component on the page will like re-render. So that's why. Thank you. So on this click me button, I want to essentially change the count state. So a button can take an on click and then like execute some kind of message. So console log count. So if I click it, right here. So when I click this, it executes this anonymous function and it console logs count. See? Well, right now count is 0. So I'm going to create a function that updates that count. So update count. And then just like a normal function, I'm going to create a const update count. Do fed arrow function. And then how do I update count again? What method do I need to use?
Set count.
Set count. It takes in count plus 1. So the current value of count, I just add it to it. So when I click it, count changes. Like so, I update count, put 1, it re-renders, and now it displays the new count. Cool. So that is functional component. Moving to a class-based component.
Use state only takes 2 at a time. You can only do like one state with one function every time you use state.
So
Like it only, like say you wanted like 3 different kinds of states.
okay. So if you wanted additional, you just do something else like color. Then you call this set color. Be like
You state itself is just a function.
blue.
So you can't like say it in one line.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is called class-based components. Or I'm sorry, functional. Now I'm going to comment this all out. And what we're going to do is class-based components. So we're not using this use state anymore. Use state is only for functional-based components. It's called a hook. We're going to get into hooks. So use state is a hook React term. So for class-based components, we need to import the component class that's built, like already built into React. So if I wanted to create a class-based component called app, how would I do that? Just think of class-based components, how we've been doing it, or I'm sorry, class, just like object-oriented programming, and creating a class. Start by defining class. It'll be class. Class. What's the name of the class? Not component. What do we call that component up there? App. Right. Extends. We want to inherit everything from component class, which is we're importing. In class-based components, right now we're returning, just straight up returning some JSX, but in class-based components, the last thing that function that is called render. So render is the last function that is called, and in here is where we want to return all this stuff. start fresh, this 0. App component render and returns. There we go. Returns. So in classes, you can't just write JavaScript like const something. Remember, this is a class. But we can write functions. I just want to make sure this is still working. Cool. In class-based component classes, what's the first method that's ran when the class instance is invoked? Constructor. So there's a little bit of debate on whether you need a constructor, but constructor. You don't really need super here, but inside the super, but in here we have something called state. This state, what is state again? State is an object that stores data that is local. It's called count 0. So in our constructor, just like we do in classes, we don't necessarily, I don't think we need this. Call this state equals, which is an object with a count. So in here,
You would never use super, right? Because
yeah. So we'll get into that later, but we're going to try to. Yeah. So if you're so you use super if you're passing in props from a parent component.
I thought a state never used that. Isn't state local?
Yes, state is, but in order to have access to props throughout the entire component, you need to pass in props. So this is another, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you pass in props. This enables you to have props, data from the parent component accessible throughout this component immediately. If you need to use props data. But right now we're not needing any props data, so it's fine. So in here, we want to display count. Bam. Let's call super. Oh, I guess the derived class. So super. Okay. Now how do I access the count down here? But up here in the functional based component, we just had count. Down here, how do I access it?
This
This dot state dot count. There we go. Find it. Now we're here in a functional based component, we have the set count method given to us to be able to mutate count state. Here it's a little different. So in here we want to do on click again, and we want to create a method that updates it. So what was it before? Update count. Update count. It's a function. Remember, this is a class. We can just create classes or functions and classes. And in here, we can't just say this state count equals 1 or plus 1. Can't do that. So we have this method called this.set state, already built into class-based components. And in here, we want to do count. So up here, set state, we're setting the state, count. So we want to access the previous value, or I guess the current value of count. How do I access the current value of count? And now, how do I access this function? since it's a class, how do we remember in order to access a method,
This dot.
this, thank you, update count. Uh-oh, got bugs. I don't need that. Oh,
Is it? Set state of undefined.
Oh. This,
Yeah.
that,
Get to import that state.
no,
Should all be within the class. So
of undefined.
what's undefined?
So that's
Two.
this is set state. Count. Not fine. Ah.
So then what if arrow?
Okay.
Oh, because it needs to be an arrow function.
So I needed to bind this. So there's a couple ways we could have done this. So update count doesn't have access to this current class instance. So I needed to bind this function to that, to this instance. And this is why people are getting away from constructor. Another way we can do this in the constructor, we can do this dot update count dot bind this, or something like that. Or we can just do it down here, bind. We're binding this to update count. So we can do that. Or we don't even need a constructor right now. Let's get rid of the constructor and just do state equals count 0. Still works. But if I don't want to use this bind, remember how before we were doing fat arrow functions?
I didn't see that.
It still works. I'm not binding it anymore because this fat arrow function automatically binds this to the context that it's in. So always use fat arrow function. Make sure like
Is the variable state an object, right? Is that like keyword almost? 'Cause
Yeah.
keyword set state.
yeah. Yeah. You can't call this like not state. It's never good practice.
Okay, so set state always looks for a dictionary or an object named state.
I don't know if it always looks for it, but actually probably does, yeah. So this is a class component.
Oh, Tom,
Yep.
did you say like you could almost do almost, or you said you could do everything using now?
Yep. So you can do everything. React is getting away from using class-based components, more using functional-based components. And so prior, like React 16 or 16.2 or whatever, you're only able to set state or create state in class-based components. We're never able to create state in functional-based components. But with the addition of these things called hooks, you're able to use these methods, hook methods called use state, use effects, use context, use reducer. It's a bunch of methods that are able to use in functional components. So these are essentially both the same. Which one do you like better?
Functional.
Well, going forward, we're gonna want you to do your challenges in both functional based and class based, because you're gonna encounter class based components, and you're gonna encounter going forward functional based components.
That's what I was asking. Like, can I just learn one?
We're gonna take a break there, and then we're gonna get into creating more components and reusability.
page.